Welcome, everybody. Here we are at this super exciting and juicy session about how to become a super connector. And when I thought of this topic, I couldn't not invite Robbie and Mike. They are the super connectors in the States. Everybody knows them. Like nearly everybody, like Mike in New York City, everybody knows Mike. And Mike knows everybody too, of course, right? Yeah. And the same thing with Robbie as well. Oh my God, maybe not in New York, but definitely in other cities, right? Boston, Philadelphia. And then they know everybody online and offline. I don't know how they do it. Anyway, so we're here. And guys, would you like maybe to briefly introduce yourselves and maybe also tell us how you became super connectors?
Sure. So I'll kick off. I'm Mike Roderick, and I started out as a high school English teacher, and I went from being a high school English teacher to becoming a Broadway producer in under 2 years. And basically a lot of people were very curious about that. So I actually started to study networking. So I hosted a lot of workshops and a lot of intensives that were focused on simulating networking experiences, basically have people acting out things like one-on-one meetings, job interviews, and cocktail parties. And when I started doing this, I started seeing just a lot of patterns in terms of how people interacted, and I built a bunch of frameworks around relationship building. So if I look back and I think about sort of like, where did the super connector kind of side of things come from? It really came from when I was sort of charged with going out and raising money, because I did not come from money. I did not have, a bunch of people around me who are going to write these big checks. So it was up to me to basically kind of expand my network. And the thing that I had learned was when I made introductions for people, when I just started introducing people to each other based on things I had noticed about them, a bunch of those people started just introducing me to people. And the more that happened, the more that I kind of started to see that, I was like, okay, well, this is really interesting. And I was in the theater world at the time, and I had this realization that very few people in the theater world were really kind of coming together. So I started hosting events where I would just bring lots of actors and writers and directors together, and basically sort of give them the opportunity to kind of meet each other. And as a result, more and more people started making intros, more and more connections started happening. And it eventually just kind of got to this place where my theater friends were introducing me to people in the business world. My business world friends were introducing me to people in the theater world, and it just kind of expanded, from there. So that's a very truncated sort of Reader's Digest version. But when I think about what was the thing that kind of moved me into that super connector space, it really was that initial, okay, now you got to meet people and start raising money.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. And I love what you said as well about being the convener, bringing people together, basically being the connector, right? Yes, because you can really accelerate your, let's say, your growth as a networker by becoming a connector, right? Absolutely. You can 10x it super quickly. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. How about you, Robbie? Sure. How did you become super connector, and what is it that you do, and where are you and in the world? By the way, Mike is in New York, as we've just mentioned.
Mm-hmm. So hi, I'm in the Philly suburbs, East Coast, US. And, listening to Michael's story, which I've definitely heard bits of before, I started thinking about how early can I go with my story? Because I've always loved bringing people together. In high school, I had friends in all the different circles, and I sort of chameleon my way from one circle to another. And I would throw birthday parties or just Friday night gatherings where I would invite people from all these different, social spheres to interact with each other, and people who sort of had no reason to ever meet would meet and good things would happen. And so I've always had that sort of innate sense of wanting to help people feel like they belong, to connect people, introduce people, host, convene. And in my 20s, I started running a 20-something LGBT and allies social and political group on Long Island, New York, which I haven't talked about in so long. I ran that for, I don't know, maybe 8 years. it got big enough that we were the news source for the rest of the community. We were organizing events, and I was using AOL to create a listserv. 200 emails at a time was the max you could send. This is pre-MailChimp. And
Wow.
so I just did that, and we would run all these events. We'd hold political discussion. I mean, it was just amazing. And I love the idea of gathering people and offering a space that was of value. And then later in my 30s, I ended up running a meetup group that also it ran for 11 years, hosted hundreds of events, grew to thousands of people. That was for progressives, that was not aligned with any particular topic or identity, but it was really about value-based connecting and community building. And that group, Socializing for Justice, is where I actually started to formally teach networking. About a year into running that group, I pulled the regulars aside. We brought them out for coffee. I mean, we had no money at the time. They paid, but we had about 20 people, and we were sitting around, and everyone was talking about how wonderful the group was and how welcome they felt. And I said, great, we really need you to help us continue that. And here are some things I'd like you to do. Come 15 minutes early. Okay. Help at the front door. Sure. And then we've got these little games. We want, okay, fine. And then just like, circle the room, work the room. And they were like, and that's when I realized that more than half of them were shy and or introverted, and they did not have the innate skill or aptitude or personality to work the room and just schmooze. And so I started working with people a little bit one-on-one. And then at the time I was dating someone who was a shy introvert, and she was trying to be seen more at work. And so I, one evening, downloaded everything I could think of, and she took notes, and those notes became the basis of a talk that I gave for free for like maybe the next year to various community groups. And then I started getting paid 2009 to speak on networking. And the talk was called Art of the Schmooze. And I did it for over a decade. It only ended when the pandemic began, because no one needed to learn how to work a room in that same way. But in the meantime, I wrote a book, Croissants versus Bagels, Strategic, Effective, and Inclusive Networking at Conferences, which really detailed everything I'd said in this talk, and did a TEDx on that same concept, launched this podcast that I see the fancy equipment here. And so I was trying to figure out the right audience for what I was doing. It started in the world of nonprofits. Eventually, I realized I could work with entrepreneurs. I launched a coaching program for entrepreneurial women to help them do biz dev. So that's kind of where my brain was when the pandemic hit. And then I had to reinvent myself. But I had this belief that events are about content and connection. And the reason people make the effort to leave their house and travel and spend all that time, energy to go places isn't just for information and content, but was for connection and possibility of meeting people and reconnecting. And so I needed to figure out how to make virtual events not an exception. And so I became a virtual event design consultant and an executive Zoom producer. But really the philosophy driving me for doing that was to help people in this new medium create engaging, dynamic, intentional spaces where people can build community and trust and learning with each other, and not just do the boring webinar, 4 to 5 minutes of death by PowerPoint, no one moderating chat and all of that. So I wanted to reinvent this space in a different way. And that's what my work has been really the last couple of years. My second book is about networking as well. It's about more biz dev focus. It's on how to do research calls that lead to running a pilot. So it's really about how do you discover likely prospects from within your existing network and likely referral partners, and then do the calls that set you up for success rather than spending a year and a half building something in secret, bringing it to the market. And market's like, who are you? What is this? I don't need this. And you're like, but I know you do. And they're like, but I don't know I need this. And that's the problem. So I think relationships have just been the through line of my work all along, inclusion, belonging. I had a politician years ago say that the most powerful thing that he could do as a politician was convene people, that because he was a politician, he could invite people and they would show up. And I realized that's that secret sauce that I had too. That was my secret power. And I read a great book around that time that he mentioned, which is Community, the Structure of Belonging by Peter Block. And I remember being on a plane being like, yes, yes. And I was by myself trying to not make my seatmate. I wanted to like tell the world. And I just, to me, this has always been part of it, but I think about the structures of how we create these spaces. So that's where I am today.
Oh my God, I have so many comments, but of course I'm not going to expose them all. But I will say, thank God Robbie exists, because he made the world of Zoom much better for so many people, me, myself included, although I still have so much to learn. And this is where I'm happy to announce that Robbie is going to be my MC, the MC at my birthday party next week. Right, Robbie?
It's true. It's true.
And I can't wait. He's going to facilitate also interaction between like among people in breakout rooms and so on. Yes, it's going to be amazing. And yes, and then I would have so many comments, but in view of time, because I know that we only have 45 minutes max, I would say let's start with the questions. What do you think, guys?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Sure.
So I know that Vic from Moscow needs to go soon, so he asked me if he can join, ask his question first. By the way, do you know what I can do? I can actually invite our friends on Facebook as well, right? Let me copy paste the link in chat, in the Facebook chat. So guys are welcome to join us. Awesome. Now, Vic, would you like to ask your question, maybe in writing? Or if you're not ready yet, just let us know. And somebody else can go before you. Maybe Vic is not ready yet.
Do you have a question to kick us off while we're waiting for Vic?
Yeah, I think Rudy has one. Okay,
Yeah, I can go.
Yeah, thank you very much, because do you know what? I have a little problem. I can't find our window anymore. Guys, I can't see you. I can only see you on Facebook. That's so weird. Okay,
So,
now back to Zoom.
You're back in Zoom? Okay. Do you want to bring Rudy up here with us?
Yeah.
Right here.
Rudy, let's do this. No, I didn't want to mute you. Oh, guys, I need Rob in my life, as you can tell. Okay.
So when do you add spotlight?
Okay, thank you, Robbie. Add spotlight.
All right.
Here you are.
Hey, Rudy.
Hey, Rudy.
Okay.
I'm glad you can see me. I always struggle with being a bit invisible, even when I go to some events where I'm not really speaking, I think. So my question is, what is the first principle? What's the first thing that people need to start doing when they are very new to schmoozing around the room, as you very nicely articulated? So that's a question for both of you.
So I'll kick that off, I guess, Michael.
Sure.
So the concept of the title of my book, Croissants versus Bagels, is that when you walk in these networking events in person, and we're starting to do that again, so this is relevant, people often are clustered in these huddles, these shoulder-to-shoulder huddles that are impossible to break into. And that's the bagel. But if someone in that circle shifts their body language to make space, that's the croissant. So mindset going in, Rudy, is to go in thinking about your intentionality, that you are there to meet people. I even have a recommendation to draft your follow-up message so you have real clarity on the kind of people you're trying to meet and what you want to talk to them about, just so you're kind of really mentally prepared. But both look for those openings, those croissants, and be the croissant. So even if Michael and I were standing together, I could stand with Michael face to face with our feet facing each other. That's much more closed off. Or Michael could have his feet like this and I could have my feet open, and then you could walk over and join us. So thinking about how you can shift your body to be a little more open, realizing you are intending to meet people. And there are sometimes moments where you want to like squirrel someone away and block everyone else so you can talk to the VIP in the room or something. But we shouldn't default to that physical stance and mentally think, okay, who do I want to meet? How do I want to do that? And then how do I look for those friendly people who are making space and who will gesture me into the circle? And then how do you play that role? Because people will then, if you do that for other people, they'll do it for you later on. It's the microcosm of what Michael said earlier about how he made introductions and other people made introductions. If you're really friendly and welcoming to people as you enter a space physically, they in turn will do that in the same event often.
Yeah. Yeah, to sort of expand on that idea, the way that I always think about sort of the large scale events is I think about it like an ocean. And basically you've got sharks, you've got dolphins, you've got those who are drowning. And so your sharks are the people who basically like they get as much attention as possible. They really just like only want you to focus on them. They're usually kind of like looking around for who else is more important than you. And you know, they're just like really, really intense. Your dolphins are what Robbie was talking about, where it's like it's the people who cluster together. Like they came here and they only want to talk to each other, and they really don't want you sort of in that, you know, in that circle. And then those who are drowning are the people who are standing outside of that circle trying to sort of like peek in, or they're being attacked in the corner by a shark, right? Like there's all sorts of instances, right, in which somebody is just kind of feeling kind of alone and at sea. So the thing that I often will recommend is that there is another category, and I call these the lifeguards. And basically the lifeguards look around for who's feeling uncomfortable, who needs help, who needs support, and they go up to those people and they say hello. So if you are feeling any kind of sort of anxiety about the initial sort of start of something, by basically just kind of going in and being like, I'm going to focus on being the lifeguard, I'm basically just going to look for who needs help, then it takes the focus off of you. And really, like, all of our anxiety about reaching out to people, connecting people, you know, those types of things, it really comes down to the fact that like we're thinking about ourselves. Like we're thinking about how am I going to look and what am I going to do? But the second that we kind of shift it and we're like, okay, I just need to learn more about these people, I need to learn about how I can help, or sort of like what I can do to support, the focus gets taken off of us, and then we get less nervous, you know, about it. And this concept goes across the board, because it's not just like if you're in a large scale gathering, you know, you have this happen in person, but it happens online too. Like there are plenty of people who are drowning online. They're posting about something that they need. They're posting about a challenge that they're having. They're posting about things that they're looking for. So you could literally, if you just wanted to get started, go to any feed right now and literally just scroll down and see who's asking for something. I can promise you there's at least 4 or 5 people who are asking for something. And if you just reach out and say, hey, here's an idea for you, or here's somebody who might be able to help, or here's something that could be useful, you'll start building a network super, super fast.
Absolutely. Wow, I can only second that. Rudy, do you feel complete, or do you have any further questions? Rudy sounds hard.
Yes, I mean, both of the answers were really on point, and I love the analogies that you used, and especially the croissant. That's my favorite type of pastry, so that's gonna stick in my head now.
Croissantsvsbagels.com. You can get a bunch of free resources to help you kind of put these actions into practice.
I'm noting them down mentally for the next event that I have in a couple of weeks. So I'm going to try out both strategies. Thank you so much, you guys.
Awesome.
Well done. And Rudy, before you go, I mean, before I take you off the spotlight, of course, you're going to stay with us for sure. But would you like to maybe briefly introduce yourself? And this is something that I will ask other people as well when they come into the spotlight, right? To briefly introduce themselves so that we know their background. Would you like to, maybe?
Yeah, sounds good. Rudy, it's short for Rudaini, which is a really complicated name, and one that I don't want to curse you with pronouncing. I'm from India. I work in the international development sector based here in Switzerland. I used to work with the UN for a number of years, and now I've switched to a very small non-profit that basically funds projects.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much. By the way, Rudy is my neighbor in Zurich. Yes, so we meet up very often. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Rudy. And okay, Robbie, what should I do? Remove spotlight, right? Yes. Mm-hmm. This is like Robbie's live teaching of Zoom settings to me and hopefully to the others as well. Okay, cool. So let's read Vic's question. I have 2 super connectors I used to work with, and we were on really good terms, but I haven't spoken to them in a few years. Any tips on how to reach out to them organically and invite them to collaborate and connect me with people, peers, clients that would be a good mutual fit for us? Both the connectors are more brainy logic, though, and my business is more about spirituality and personal growth, building self-trust. Another piece from Vic is, what are some good places online to hang out with thought leaders and visionaries, spiritual entrepreneurs, communities or groups you could recommend? Okay, so let's unpack this. Maybe we can answer the first question, right? About the two super connectors that Vic would like to reconnect with. How about that, guys? And by the way, sure. Because Vic is on Facebook, he's not here on Zoom, I will briefly introduce him. So he's already told us something about his business, and he works with spirituality, personal growth, building self-trust, and quantum science, the quantum science as well. And he's based in Moscow, right? Shortly put, where's the cool people at? Okay, good. So that refers to the second question. Okay, let's unpack this. First question, how should Vic reconnect to these two super connectors that he knew a few years ago?
Sure. I guess I can jump in on this one. So I think the very first thing to just always consider is that you never know what is going on in somebody's life right now. You have no idea if they're having a great time. You have no idea if they're having a tough time. You know, so I am a very, very firm believer in you never reach out about something that you need before you understand where somebody is and sort of like what's going on in their life. Like it's just one of the worst ways to sort of reconnect, right? So I think that one of the best things you can do if you haven't talked to somebody in a long time is to actually call it out, because I think that the mistake that is made, and I think that the reason why a lot of relationships get damaged is people don't call it out. Like they don't address the fact that they haven't been in touch, right? And then they'll reach out to you and they'll ask you for something and you'll be like, dude, I haven't heard from you in like 7 years. Like why do you want me to join your Kickstarter, whatever it is, right? So I think it's the type of thing where what you want to do is you want to reach out and you want to call it out and you want to basically say like, hey, listen, I had the realization the other day that we haven't talked in like 5 years. And that's on me because I haven't done it. Like I haven't reached out. I've had crazy things going on, et cetera, but you crossed my mind. You came into my mind and I was like, you know what? I want to see what's going on. I want to see how you're doing. I want to see what's happening in your world. And then you just let them answer. You let them tell you sort of what's going on and where they're at. And based on that response, you're going to know whether or not they want to get back in touch and they want to talk about it. You're going to know whether they're in that place where like, I do want to help and support you right now. I'm in that moment. I'm sort of in that place, right? Or if they're not. And it's really, really important because if you just reach out with the ask, or if you just reach out with the like, well, let's get together and collaborate and figure out how we can help each other. Well, it's like, dude, I don't know what's going on in your life. And that's a problem, right? Yeah. So I think, first, always call it out, always address the fact that you have been out of touch. And second, find out how somebody's doing before you bring any of your own needs or concerns sort of into the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow,
I have a yes and for that. I think that's all really solid advice, but I think it also depends on the level of the ask. So I had someone that I haven't talked to in 10 years, but I used to be friends with a lot, really good friends with, but we don't live in the area, but we're part of the same community for a long time. And she said on a Facebook PM, I'm going to be performing in your city. You were such a big supporter of me when I got started doing this 16 years ago. I thought you'd want to know about it. And I thought you might know other people who might want to know about it. And I know you're just so good at knowing good people. And, hopefully you can share this. Hope you're doing really well. Sending the best to you and the kids. And I'm like, hey, great to hear from you. Checked out your show. Looks really interesting. Happy to think about who I can tell. But it was like, she wasn't asking me to invest money or time. It was really just said like, oh, that's cool. I can think of 5 people I can send that to, or I can put a social post about that, right? Like, so the low level ask, I think, no big deal. Like if I hadn't responded, that would just mean I was overwhelmed and not able to, right? Like that would have been her answer. But if she required me, it's sort of like when people require me to do a pre-meeting before interviewing me for a podcast. I'm like, that's actually more time. Like, let's just do the thing. So I think it depends. Like, how much warming up do I need, or what I suggest doing is really like related to the level of investment of their time or money or effort. So if you just wanted a one-off introduction, it's like, hey, Mike, I haven't seen you in ages. I was just thinking about you because I was on LinkedIn and I spotted this person and realized you probably know them. If you've got the time, would you, and you know them well enough, would you be kind enough to make an intro? If this isn't a good time, like, totally get it. When you could get up for air, I'd love to schedule a chat to play catch up, so that you're still inviting the continuation of the relationship, but you're not requiring that in order to make a simple ask. But if you're looking to do bigger collaboration, like we should be partners on this project, then I think everything Michael is saying is really valid, because you're asking way more of them and their interests might have gone in a different direction than you're aware of, and it just wouldn't be a good fit. They might be dealing with something in their life that was taking up all their time and energy, and nothing they post on Facebook is reality, right? Like, we can't look at their Facebook posts to get a pulse usually, because people aren't going to post the stuff that's really hard. And so I think that I would just sort of measure that out a little bit. But I think you're spot on, Michael. Don't go in for a big ask out of nowhere and then expect a good response, because it may have nothing to do with you per se, but you could have gone around it differently.
Yeah. And I just want to point something out. And that is that one of the most important things to understand about super connecting, relationship building, is that there are nuances. There is no, like, if you do this, you're always going to get this result. So just as I sort of presented a scenario and Robbie recognized that there are scenarios where this outreach, if it's kind of like a light lift, is not really required to sort of be like, okay, well, let's sort of get back in touch. That's a nuance, right? That's something that he's discovered in his own experience. So I think that the danger that I see, and I'm sure Robbie, probably you've had some experience with this as well, the danger that I see is that people will see some kind of piece of advice around networking or super connecting, et cetera, and they will take that piece of advice as literally as humanly possible and try to do it exactly the way that they heard it. And they don't pay attention to the fact that there is nuance and there's always little shifts and changes in all of these things. So we don't want to get ourselves locked into a place where we're believing that the way that somebody who is an expert in that space is telling us how to think about it or how to do it is the only way to think about it and do it.
That's totally.
I'll just add on that there are low-level ways of staying in touch with people so that you don't have to act. I mean, maybe you won't have spoken to them, but you'll still kind of be on their radar. I send birthday cards. If I see people having a great moment or a sad moment, I'll send a congratulations or a sympathy card. If someone's doing a book launch, I join their launch team and I write a review without a lot of prompting. If they're doing a podcast launch, I talk about it, I share it, I suggest guests. So like, I don't have to have a one-on-one conversation with them in a 5-year time frame to still be helpful in really specific ways that aren't big time investments for me, so I can manage doing it for a volume of people without, there's certain people I'm going to put more attention on, but these people will at least get some touch point of some kind. And that makes the ask, if there is one in the future, a lot easier, because it isn't a wait out of the blue. I haven't talked to you. I haven't thought of you. Instead, when they think of my name, they're like, oh, that makes me feel good. Like, Robbie's always doing nice things. Like, and then that just helps open the dialogue. So if there are super connectors in your life that you're trying to re-engage with, before you even reach out to them, you could just create a little thoughtful campaign of re-engagement by getting on their radar through social posts. Send them a card, send them a quick little thought of you, whatever, gift or something. My favorite gift recently was someone sent a gift for my kids, because they know me well and they've known me for years, and they'd already sent me a fruit basket and chocolate. They'd already done that. They gave me a toy my kids could play with, and like, that felt super personalized. And they still love it. So you can do little things to kind of pay attention to people, to kind of get on people's radar before you try to actually schedule a call with them.
Absolutely. Yes, that reminds me of something that happened last year to me. I got a lot of presents for my birthday, and then I got for my birthday a present for my kittens, right? And that was the best present. Yeah, exactly. And it was really, really appreciated by myself and my kittens. So, yes. So Vic comments, say what? No super formula by the super connectors. How is this possible? Of course, this is a joke because Vic is always joking, as I know very well. And Martina knows very well too, right? Because we're all in the same mastermind. Okay, cool. That is amazing. I need to add something. Maybe Jason has to add would like to add something because he's a global super connector as well. And he raised his hand. So I'm going to spotlight you, Jason, as Robbie taught.
Let's see. Hi. One thing that came to mind, sorry for the background noise, I'm in Paris and it's very loud, was I think I think the question was, how do you be a super connector? And for me, it's all about keywords, right? So I try to keyword people as much as possible. So if someone puts out saying, I'm looking for a real estate broker in New York, and maybe I'll write back saying, well, are you looking to buy? Are you looking to rent? Because those are two different things. And then I'll literally go to my Google contacts and type in, broker, and 10 people will come up, and I'll try to figure out the best match for that person. So always keeping in mind, when you talk to someone new or even old, when you refresh, what are the key things that you want to listen for? What are the key things you want to put them down for as, subject matter expertise, or what kind of inquiries they want to get. And then when they're asking about the big ask, small ask, how do you reach out to someone? Sometimes if it's when I see requests, like let's say, well, in that case, a broker, I might, and if I haven't talked to the person for a while, I might be like, hey, I think you're still on brokering. Are you still doing rentals, or are you only doing purchasing? If so, then I have this thing for you. If not, maybe you know a junior colleague. So it could be a referral for them. So kind of like, and in the photo world, sometimes it's like, I get a lot of photographers saying, I need an assistant for this day. And if I haven't talked to the roster of assistants in a while, I might reach out to the person and say, are you still assisting, or have you moved on? It's the same idea, like, are you open to this sort of thing? So that was my little contribution. But really keeping in mind, the super connecting part is keeping in mind those few keywords for each person, if you can, or the best next step is recording them into a searchable function somehow, spreadsheet or Google Contacts or whatever. Or
I got to give a shout out to Michael on this, actually, Jason, because Michael blew me away. I think, was I interviewing you when you told me about this? Maybe we were just chatting. But he has this amazing spreadsheet where his introductions are now seamless because he tracks them in a spreadsheet, and he can copy and paste exactly the paragraph. It is simplicity in a sense that it's not an expensive bloated CRM that's got everyone in the world he's ever talked to, including his plumber. It's more thoughtful than that. But I'd love, actually, because I saw a question earlier that was asked about how do you manage contacts and all of that. Yep. And I think of Michael as being sort of a real master in this. So
yeah,
sure. Yeah, so the way that I think about it is, I've got a spreadsheet, and then I have columns that are specific to to the individual. So there's a column, of course, for like name and email, but there's also a column specifically for whatever paragraph I use to introduce them, so that rather than rewriting the same paragraph over and over again to make that introduction, I can literally just cut and paste that paragraph that's in there. But the thing is, because that's a block of text and it's in a spreadsheet, let's say somebody says that they are interested in crypto, where like there are a lot of people are sort of like thinking about that. I could literally type in the search crypto for that spreadsheet, and every single intro that I've created that uses that word is going to show up, right? And it's going to be highlighted. So then I'm able to say, okay, well, here's all the people who I know who kind of do that, right? I also have a column that is for profession, right? So if I have if I'm looking for, like Jason was pointing out, a real estate person, right? And maybe I'm looking for a broker, I'm looking for somebody who sells, whatever it is, I can just search that, right? And sort of see, and then I have a column for location, so that if somebody tells me they're going to LA, they're going to New York, they're going wherever, I'm able to just go to that column and filter it and be like, okay, here's all my people in New York, right? Type of thing. And what helps me personally is basically just every time I make an intro or every time I sort of connect people, I've got that spreadsheet open. So all I need to do, if I've made that intro for the first time, is cut and paste that introduction and then put that information in. Another thing, for those of you who use Calendly or any one of these services where people fill out something to set up a meeting with you, another little hack for that is to basically ask them for how they would introduce themselves, and to basically say, like, I sometimes meet people and I make intros. If you want me to think about that for you, feel free to write how you'd like to be introduced. And then all I have to do is just cut and paste that like right into the spreadsheet. So now I don't even have to write that note anymore. Oh, and the last piece, which is really important that I think a lot of people forget about, is I have a column that is for notes. And that's where I put names of kids. That's where I put, experiences that they've had. That's where I put they invested in this company, they worked on this. And that column worth of notes, I can't tell you the number of times where I've been able to really help somebody by just going to that column and searching that column for those keywords.
Amazing. Robbie, there's something you would like to add, right? It looks like you would like to speak.
Oh, I mean, first of all, that last piece about including something in the calendar intake form was brilliant. Because I started gathering mailing addresses by including it in my podcast guest intake form. And I was gathering addresses without any sense of what I was using them for. And then finally was like, okay, I've got enough now to actually create a system around this. And so, but I love this idea of being more intentional about asking people to write these for you. I'm curious of two questions, and Jessica, I'm taking over interviewing Michael because I want to know, how many people are you managing and how much time does it take you to manage that spreadsheet? Because it sounds simple, but there's a reason we aren't all doing it.
Yeah. So I have two sections of that spreadsheet. And one is for the people who I sort of spend time with and like I know, and like I spend a decent amount of time, like they're part of my circle. And then I actually have another one that is literally just for more acquaintances, right? And people who I've just kind of like randomly met. So that first one, I go through that and I'm looking at that on a pretty regular basis. Sometimes once or twice a day. I'm paying attention, I'm paying attention to that and sort of looking at that. And there's probably close to, I don't know, like 2,000 people on that one, right? But then there's, the acquaintance one, which, we're talking thousands upon thousands that fit into the acquaintance one. And obviously with those, I don't have very extensive breakdowns of the introduction that I'm going to make because I haven't really gotten to know them at all yet, right? Like I've just kind of met them at various things and I know, okay, they do this for work. So their columns are like these little, things. But if somebody's like, I don't know a doctor who studied, I'm looking for a doctor who studied low flush niacin, and I'm like, okay, here's this guy I met on this, cruise ship like 17, weeks ago or whatever it is, that type of thing. So yeah, that's how I approach it and how I look at it.
So the key question and follow up is, how does one move from tier 1 to tier 2 or tier 2? Yes.
It's a great question.
How does one get into the core?
Yeah, so the people who get into the core are the ones who I've spent a significant amount of time with, right? So they're the ones who we have worked on something together. We've been, involved in certain projects together. We've known each other for a really long time, and I have a lot of information on them. and they stay within that, within that block, right? And most of the time, if I've had at least a couple of interactions with them, they end up in that first one because I know them better, right? And the big thing for me is curating. One of the most important things, the thing that has made everything in my life easier, is in really being hyper intentional about who I make introductions for and how I connect people and how I sort of think about the community that I have around me. So I ask myself, when I think about the people on that spreadsheet, I ask myself, like, are these people who I am willing to make intros for and stake my reputation on those intros? Because every time I make an introduction, my reputation goes along with it. And if somebody has a bad experience with somebody, that will affect my reputation. That's part of how that, sort of a whole side of things work. So I really do always ask myself, are these people that I 100% trust at this stage in the game? And that's not to say that every once in a while you're wrong. Like, there are some really good actors out there. There are some really, there are some people who can, completely, sort of present one way and then do something completely different when you make an intro for them. But most of the time, you can really tell who people are when you get to meet them, and you're like, yep, this is a solid, this person's solid, they're helpful, they're really thoughtful, they want to support others. Or, oh, this is a person who I don't know, there's something kind of sketchy and weird. There's something where they're not really being very, very thoughtful. There's something where they're always trying to sort of get things. I don't know if they're going to, and I just kind of go with that gut.
Yeah. Wow. Robbie, you have a second question, right? You said you had two.
Well, I asked the two, but I'll throw on my two were about maintaining it and how many, but
yeah.
So something I've done is not nearly as extensive, but it could be a place to start. There are certain people that I recommend on a regular basis. My podcast editor I've worked with since 2015. I made 3 introductions this week. So I have a template. They used to be called canned responses. They're now called templates. It's part of Google, part of Gmail, I should say. And so I have a very simple message that says, sorry for the quick reply. I wanted to make this introduction. And it already has his information. And all I say, I basically has a line that says, I have a friend who's interested in finding an editor for their podcast. And then I just put the friend's contact info and their podcast link or their website link. And the subject line fills in automatically. And so as soon as I get the inquiry online, I immediately, I'm pulling that up, filling in their email, and as we're getting off the call, I am hitting send. And so I don't have lots and lots of those, but for the half dozen most recurring referrals, if I find myself retyping certain things over and over again, I'm like, oh, this is somebody that I'm clearly going to be talking about a bunch. I'm going to set this up. So that can help you start to move towards being a better connector. I think one of the reasons we don't do connecting as often is we don't have it easy to do. And I really always value the double opt-in, but these people that I'm sending people to have already said yes. They are like, Robbie, you send me good people, I will take any inquiry. And so set those relationships up can also simplify things, because you don't have to stop and be like, hey, random person, can I send someone to you? Hey, someone else, did you want? It's like, I get everyone else's yes in the moment, and I already got a pre-yes from someone else. So that's the other thing to know about.
Or if it's only a one-way where one side is open to it, but the other side you're not sure, or you're not sure how to get in there, I sometimes ask the person to ghostwrite a little bit too. In other words, I say to the person, if you want me to connect you with this person in my network, take a peek at their LinkedIn and send me a couple lines that you see the most relevant. And so I've been pleasantly surprised, because I'll say my part, but I had an event producer who needed to get more work because he just got let go of his job. And I had these 4 or 5 people who are in the events world who I could connect him with. They're good people, but I had him look at each one. And they said, for example, oh, this wedding planner well, I don't really do weddings, but if they ever need to get talent, like performance, or if they ever need to get a special celebrity guest, then I could do that. So like he customized his best in, and then I wrote, hey, this guy's a good guy, and here's what he says about you, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it was thoughtful there.
Yeah.
The other thing that Robbie's bringing up, I think that's really, really important, is there is a major difference between an introduction, a referral, and a favor. And I think it's really important to understand that when you're making introductions. So if an introduction is an introduction where you're just like, I think these people should know each other, then most of the time you're dealing with a double opt-in situation, because you're basically saying like, I think you guys should meet, but I want to make sure that you're both open sort of to that type of thing. A referral, it's rare that you have to deal with a lot on the double opt-in side, because basically whoever you're referring is not turning down business. Like they want that business. So if the other person says, yeah, I want to hire somebody to help with this, nobody who has that service is going to get mad at you for not double opting in if you go, if you literally say like, here's this person, you can, if you know that person is busy, you can always check and basically be like, do you have, enough time to have another client right now? If you know that that's the case, if that's an issue, but a lot of the time it's not. And then the last one that a lot of us forget about is that sometimes an intro is a favor. Sometimes there is somebody who your friends want to meet or somebody wants to meet, and you know that this is not going to be an even exchange because this person is looking for advice or they're looking for support or whatever the scenario is. So if it's a favor, you do need to go to that other person and say, listen, this is somebody who, I'm going to be honest, they're just looking for advice. Or they really can't, I know that you have this service, they really can't afford to hire you, but they are a friend of mine and I would love to be able to help them out. And I want to know, do you have the time to do that? Would that be okay? And that would be a favor. And this is also, and I learned this from this guy, Patrick Ewers. He has this great thing of, if somebody comes and asks him for something and he's like, I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can really do it. He will, before he says yes, he will say to the other person, he'll say, I'm focused on this right now. I don't normally take these introductions, but if you would like me to take it as a favor to you, I'm happy to do it. And only then, if the person's like, yes, I really need it, will they take that favor, right? Will they sort of go? So when I saw him sort of talk about that, I was like, that is genius, right? Because if you're in a place where you're just like totally overwhelmed, right? And the thing is, if you become known as a super connector, you are going to become overwhelmed if you are not good at really creating boundaries around yourself. The second people believe that you know people, they want to introduce you to everybody just for the purpose that you know people. So it's very, very important to decide, like, what are your boundaries in all of this? Because there are tons and tons of super connectors out there who end up completely overwhelmed and don't get anything done that they want to get done. And in some cases, if they have a business, don't even grow their business because people only know them as being a super connector. And the thing to really understand, and this is, I've spoken about this in the past, and this is something I learned myself, because I definitely had a whole period where I was what I call connection rich and cash poor, where basically like everybody loves you, nobody wants to pay you, right? Because you're introducing people, you're helping everybody, you're supporting everybody. And it was because I had a misunderstanding of what connecting actually is. And connecting is not a catalyst, it is an amplifier. So whatever it is you're selling, whatever it is you're doing, whatever it is you're like, the relationship building, all of that is an amplifier to what you're doing. If you think of it as the catalyst, and you basically put the focus on, I need to connect and build these relationships to make my business happen, and you don't pay attention to what it is that you actually have to offer, and you don't really think about how does my thing help others and how do I make sure that other people know what I want, you will have tons of people love you. You'll have tons of connections happening, but your opportunities will be very, very small. Mm-hmm. And it's so important to recognize this. And I think that there's a major danger in getting so bogged down in that sort of connecting and super connecting side of things that you don't make sure that you educate your network as to the things that you need. Because when people see you giving and supporting and helping everybody else, subconsciously they start to believe that you have no needs. Like, they start to believe that you must be all set if you're able to just connect everybody and solve everybody else's problems. Like, they don't see you as needing anything. So I just I get on my soapbox a little bit about this because I've experienced it. So yeah. I just think it's a really important point to address.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for mentioning this. And also, thank you so much for mentioning boundaries. We need to set boundaries as super connectors. And this is what I did as well. I tried to set boundaries. And also, one of the strategies that I adopted is that I kind of scaled to groups. This is my hack in terms of, super connecting. So probably I'm known as a super connector who creates groups every day, all day, basically, right? So you have categories in your spreadsheet. I have groups. I just connect people and I create groups, right? And when I meet somebody that has, that particular interest or that profession that I want to, connect them with somebody based on that thing, then I just add them to the group or I create a new group. And that is a way for me to structure things. Of course, I'm still doing one-on-one intros, of course, like every day, but I also have the groups, and that helps me a lot because I can structure things better. I can categorize them better. And at the same time, I'm creating, value for all of these people who can, just interact without me being there. Yes. So guys, put all of our hacks together. Yes, Rob.
I think related to what both of you are saying here, and I really appreciate, Michael, you framing this for us about boundary setting. And I know you and I agree that it's important that we also ask. I know that's a big part of your message that I've heard. I am really good at asking. And I'm unabashedly good at asking when I need something. And I do it in the most transparent way possible so others can learn from me how I do it. But I do think it's much easier to ask when you've been giving all along. So it's like, I don't have any reservations about asking for a review for my book or, an introduction to somebody or whatever, rides to the airport, because I have been literally and figuratively giving rides to the airport for decades. And what's really interesting is that I often get the most immediate response for support from people who did not directly receive support from me, but who have witnessed me being supportive of others. And so they want to support me. They see me as a giver and they see this as an opportunity to give back. And I love that. If you only do these things one-to-one, and it's always just through a one-to-one introduction, then your community doesn't really get to see the ripple effect. So I like the fact that a lot of the things I do are in a group format. I'm always hosting regular convenings. I host several monthly convenings for various groups, and I host a weekly event of my own. And those are spaces where I'm giving, or I attend other people's groups and I'm giving in the chat. I'm sharing resources. I'm offering to make introductions, and I'm doing it all in a really kind of a little more public space, both because I want the information to be seen by more than just the one person via email, because others are probably wondering the question too, and it amplifies more. But I want it to be seen that way. So when I suddenly have a need, people aren't like, well, who are you? The other thing I do that has saved my sanity is if there's something that I get asked about a lot, I host a free 1-hour masterclass on the topic live, and then I make that recording available. So if someone were to ask me about podcasts or book writing or book launching or like content for my first book or whatever it is, I'm like, awesome. Hey, what would be great is if you want to check this resource out first, and then let me know if you have any questions. If they are serious after listening or watching and getting my notes, they're probably a likely prospect because they are thinking about
Right.
this in a bigger way. They understand the nuance. They're thinking about the problem in a bigger way. And if they just are satisfied with that quick hit, and I've gave them links to things, awesome. I used to have the same hour-long conversation every time. And I was like, this isn't working. So at some point I realized, oh, I've done this a bunch. And now I'm at a point where I no longer do free master classes. I'll do $100 2-hour master class on a topic. I'll get a bunch of people to show up live. I'll make a little bit of money, and then I'll make it available for half the cost as the replay. And so some of that's just become over time, like small little drops of cash in the bucket, but it's giving me better quality content because I'm building it live with input. And then I often turn that content into books later or programs later because it's a way for me to test things. But it's just, I agree. We have to put some boundaries. I often get referred for like specific knowledge, and I'm like, that's great. Here's the thing you can find: asynchronous learning. If you're really serious, come chat. And then I will also say on my website, I don't have a contact form. I have Google Forms. So if I get referred, if people come to my website through referral for anything I know, there's not a blank contact form. They have to physically fill in all these required steps in a Google form before they hit submit. And that actually lowers the number of people who will just randomly ask for my brain. If they're willing to fill out the form, they've already done some thinking. I'll know more about them. We'll make better use of the time together. And the people who are just kind of passing by, kicking tires, the pick your brain people won't make the effort. And that has also made my life a lot easier.
Oh, wow. Definitely.
Love that.
Yes. Sacred words, we would say in Italian. Absolutely. Wow. This has been amazing. And in view of time, though, I would bring Vic into the spotlight because in the meantime, he has joined us here on Zoom. And I know that he has to go very soon. And he does have a second question, right? So maybe we can talk about his second question for 5 minutes. And then we have many more questions, right? So I think we're going to go over by 15, 20, maybe 25 minutes. If you guys can stay. And yes, let's start with Vic. Hello, Vic.
Buongiorno, everybody. Thank you for having me. So one of my quests lately has been to find more miraculous, crazy, visionary people who are not from this planet. So thank you for being here. You're all lovely. And I'm just looking for, more of my people wherever they are in the world. And I've been doing searches in both English and Russian speaking resources that I know, but coming up short. So where are the golden people, the golden energy, the radiance, the humor, the playfulness, the innovation, the R&D, the spacemanauts, the oceanauts? Where are they? Any communities, blogs, authors, you name it, I love it.
I'll just jump in and, in regards to that, I think that there are certainly lots of different groups out there. And I think it really is going to come down to what it is that you actually want out of that group. So there's a very, very big difference between sort of joining groups because you are interested in learning a particular thing that somebody has sort of like pulled together and sort of, had some kind of expertise on, and groups that are really just focused around a specific topic, right? And it's just kind of a random gathering of people that's been put together based on sort of whoever the, sort of contributor is. So I think that the very first question is, which of those are you looking for? Are you looking to be part of a community that is geared towards teaching something, where it's like you want to be in some sort of entrepreneurial community, you want to go somewhere where there's going to be a specific sort of education component? Or are you looking for something that is much more geared towards a social component? Because those two types of groups are very, very different. The ones that are educational based are going to be much more geared towards things like things like these live streams, right? Experts basically selling their services and the things that they have out there, you know, whoever the leader is, they tend to be more paid, you know, than anything else. Whereas a lot of the social tends to be lower cost, or in some cases free, you know, and it is more about the people sort of getting together. So I that would be my question, is like, which of those worlds do you are you interested in? Because I think that there are ideas that may pop in my head of like, oh, this community would be really great, but only based on this is the type of thing I'm looking for.
Cool. That was a good riff. Thank you. Of course, I'm interested in both, but with priority right now on the second type, the social community, just meeting new cool people.
Yeah. So I think that if you're focusing on more of the social, the social side of things, the best thing to do in your situation is you've already got a network. Like, you've already got people who are part of your circle who believe in the things that you believe, right? Who are into that sort of spiritual side, you know, side of things. Whenever I am looking from a group standpoint, I go to the friends of mine who are in that world, and I basically say, where do you go? Like, where do you go when you are looking for spirituality? Where do you go when you're looking for, and most of the time they have a group that they can recommend to me. They have a program that they can recommend to me. They have something that sort of fits within that category. I don't know personally. I know people who sort of fit into that kind of spiritual world, but I don't know personally a lot of social groups that are part of that. I'm in far more sort of entrepreneurial, like teaching oriented communities, and know more people in that world. But that would be my suggestion if that's what you're looking for. And I'd love to throw it over to Robbie, who may have some other thoughts and ideas on this as well.
Vic, could you repeat the type of person you're hoping to meet? It was a string of descriptors, and I wanted to make sure I caught them.
Yeah, the main thing is I'm looking for people out of this world who are weird, who are different, who are creative, who have a fantastic in touch with their humor, lightness, creativity.
Okay,
that's what I'm looking for.
Are you familiar with Burning Man?
I am.
Okay. Find your way into those kinds of communities. That would be my suggestion. And because people come from literally all over the world to go to Burning Man and plan for it for 14 months, there are online threads and online communities and forums and discussion groups. And then you could put something into a Google search that's like events like Burning Man, events like Burning Man in Europe, events like Burning Man, right? Like, and sort of find your way into communities that are intentional, that are artsy, that are out of this world, they're looking beyond, you know, the norm. It's not like going to be held in a boardroom at another hotel, you know. And then I would also look at spaces like San Francisco, where there's going to be a culture, but you want to look for, like, maybe there's some theater within that space, but not traditional theater. Maybe you want to look at street theater communities. There's some great street theater groups that really work to cultivate people doing this art form. There might be an association of street theater actors that you could find. There's an association for everything. So I'm sure that's true. You can find all the people who have ever done a living statue. It'll be a very boring meeting. They'll all just be standing them. So I don't know. I feel like you have to, like, whichever one of those things sort of ignites you the most, like, both search for that and then ask Google to tell you things like, and then I would also look on YouTube to see what people are posting, like pictures of or video clips of, things like that, because that you might find there might be some hashtags on YouTube that you might then want to carry over and look on Twitter for. It kind of depends on what space you're looking at. I have had a shift happen on my LinkedIn, and I think of LinkedIn as very, very staid and buttoned up and professional. My LinkedIn is so fun right now. It's all these people talking about inked in, which is all these people with like huge inked sleeves, inked necks and everything very visible. People talking about hashtag, this is what a professional looks like with their colored hair and nose rings and, their tat showing. And what's interesting is I started to see this where they didn't all know each other. Like I got into one thread and then I had these like 4 or 5 people. And then of course, because I'm following them, when they comment on someone else's stuff, I then get notified and then I'm finding, so it's been like, here I am thinking like, LinkedIn's kind of just a place I put some stuff out but I'm having like genuine conversations with interesting people that are like pushing me to write content that feels more real. I mean, the word genuine and authentic are kind of overused, but it makes me write about my actual life in a way that I hadn't been, instead of the filtered life that I always wrote about. I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm feeling about this conference I went to, and here's a picture of my shoes where I wore sneakers. This is my edginess, is I wore sneakers to a buttoned-up conference. Woo. But like, hey, so I don't know. It's like, it's not that you have to go to a particular platform. It's that within any platform, there are going to be these conversations happening, just like there's Black Twitter, right? You've got to find your way into those conversations. And sometimes it's a hashtag you follow. Sometimes you follow a certain number of people. And then because the algorithm, you'll find who they're following, right? And commenting on. And so it's been eye-opening to discover this new side of LinkedIn, but the same is going to be true on TikTok and Instagram, probably more so even. So I just think go in with an open mind and then just sort of start documenting the trial. As you find people, you'll find more people.
Awesome. Making lots of notes here. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Get the recording as well. Absolutely. By the way, Sandy has just joined us on Zoom, but she just wrote on Facebook, I kind of get what you're looking for. Let's connect and have a chat sometime.
Cool.
See Sandy on both platforms now. Okay, cool. Great. Let's now, I would say, have a look at Joel's question. Let me remove you from Spotlight, Vic. Bye. Yes, we can't bring on Joel because he's just on Facebook. And he asks, how much is too much to share when introing oneself to a stranger? That is, I've always found it easier to ask the other person to tell me something that is more meaningful than a job, city, nationality, etc. But I find people are not comfortable sharing beyond expected questions like demographics. Therefore, what is your advice to get the person to trust you and open up to have a meaningful exchange? Who would like to go?
I can jump in with something, and I want to give credit where credit is due. Bob Berg, co-author of The Go-Giver, has a list called Feel Good Questions. And the first one is, tell me how you got into this line of work, or tell me how you started your business. Tell me how you decided to focus on this thing, right? And you're inviting people to share a story. And what I love is, like, I do this on my podcast, a variation of this, right? People telling me a story about their life, whatever their pre-programmed, like, this is what I always say, canned phrases. When they start telling a story, they don't go that way. They start to actually settle into telling you a story. And it's a good story because it's the reason they're doing this. It's usually a positive ending. And so that lights people up and makes it more memorable. Another question he often follows up with is like, what is the most surprising or fun or interesting thing about the thing you're doing, right? So I sometimes ask people, like, I was just at a networking event in person last night, and I was chatting with someone, and I found out that he is a 1-year-old. And so I said, what's been the most surprising thing about being a dad? And that led to a great conversation, right? You don't have to have kids to be able to ask that question and give them the space to really shine, because they're like, oh, I could talk about this and that, so there's that. And then the last question, his sort of wrap-up question is, how will I know that I'm speaking with someone that would be a great referral for you? And that question could be a really great way, after you had a little chit chat, to just kind of just bring the fact that we are actually here networking, like, to the spotlight, but not in a like, I need to grab the mic and tell you all about me. It's an offer. You're giving them the space to share that. And then you may on the spot have a reference for them or not, but you can just ask some clarifying questions, or just like, okay, that's really interesting. I mean, I was talking to a guy about like remodeling house kitchens. I have no one that I can refer this person to right now. But I'm like, how did that happen? You know, how did you end up doing that line of work? That was a conversation. And now he's way more memorable in my mind because we had that conversation. So if someone does need their kitchen remodeled in my geographic area, I will remember him. And, you know, so those are some things. And you can look up, if you go to Google, you can find a list of Bob Berg's feel good questions. I believe there are 10. And then the bonus question is the how will I know I'm speaking with someone that would be a great referral for you?
Awesome. That's great. Mike, is there anything that you would like to add?
Yeah. So I always sort of think about this as sort of layers, and sort of how we approach things, and some of these layers are going to basically just like get people to open up more than others. So your first layer is always the professional in these environments, right? Like most people are thinking in that particular way. So most people will start with the professional, right? Your next layer that people are going to go down to is the personal. And the thing is, if you go too deep into the personal at the very beginning, people get freaked out because I don't actually know you yet, right? Like I don't feel that connected with you. So I'm not going to tell you what my, greatest fear is in the world, right? Like whatever the thing is that, you thought was your deep question, right? But I may, mention, I may be happy to open up about where I live right now, obviously not my address, but, where I live, right? And whether or not whether or not I have kids, those types of things, right? But then for a number of people, if you want to go a layer lower, you can get into the inspirational. And you can basically ask them about why are they doing what they do. And the thing is, people get bored when you ask them what they do. They get super excited when you ask them why they do it, right? Like, and it doesn't matter who they are. Like, they're like, oh, because now it's like this is the motivation that I sort of have, behind it. So if you take it to that layer of inspirational, well, now somebody's literally starting to tell you about like why they're doing it. So what's going to happen? They're going to be way more likely to open up, and there's a very good chance that they're going to be open to the next layer, which is the aspirational, which is what do they want to do next? How far do they want to go? What have they always dreamed of? What are they looking for? And if you have reached the point where you've gone professional, personal, inspirational, all the way down to aspirational, then in many cases, they're open to telling you the absolute deepest level, which is the problematic. And what is the challenge that they're experiencing? What is the difficulty that they're experiencing? And I get on my soapbox about this a lot. Robbie's heard this, before. The worst question you can start a conversation with when you're talking to somebody brand new is, how can I help you? Because you don't know them yet. And they don't want to open up about their problems and their challenges and all those different types of things. But if you go down these additional layers and they're opening up about all these different types of things, sometimes they will literally just share with you where their challenges are and what they're working on. And sometimes you can literally just say something along the lines of, it sounds like things are going really well. Is there anything right now that might be a challenge, that might be causing some, sort of issue? And if so, what kind of support, would be helpful at this stage in the game? And a lot of the time, people will just tell you. They'll be like, yeah, I'm trying to sell these books and nobody's buying them, so I don't really know what to do. Like whatever it is, right? Like they're going to just share that. But the thing is, if like we open, and I think that's the mistake, we open at this like sometimes super deep level, and we're expecting people to sort of crack themselves open, and just we as human beings are wired to protect ourselves, right? Like we are wired to stay safe. So if somebody opens a conversation with, tell me your deepest fear and tell me like why, you're upset or whatever it is, we're like, no, I don't want, like, who are you? But if we start going those layers and we start digging in, I think those opportunities can present themselves. Robbie.
Michael, layer 2 was inspirational, 3 was aspirational, 4 was problematic. What was 1?
1 was professional.
I'm just documenting this in the notes here because you're great at creating these frameworks.
Thanks.
That make things way more memorable.
He's so great at creating frameworks that now he teaches people how to create frameworks, right, Mike?
Yes, indeed.
Talent of yours. Besides, networking, then there's, thought leadership as well. Amazing.
Yes.
Okay. So, because I know that we still have a few questions that we would like to answer, how about we bring Martina to the spotlight? Martina from Boston. Robbie, she's from Boston as well.
Cool.
Yes.
I spent 20 years there.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. Oh my God, this is such a amazing opportunity, and thank you so much for all these golden nuggets of information. It's like, wow, it's really opening my whole world. And I have a question regarding, Robbie, what you said earlier when it comes to us like telling what your needs are, because I have been like, I love networking, but I did that quite like unconsciously because I like connecting with people and stuff. But then I noticed somehow that I don't get much back, and that's obviously on my side because I wasn't intentional about it. But how can I be more like, do you have any tips around that where, I can also be more transparent and really ask what I want? I mean, obviously being clear what I want, but anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you have an example of something that you would want to be asking for support around?
Yeah, just in general, when you're connecting with people and you do a favor for them, or for example, I brought on a lot of people on my IG lives, like kind of this interviewing thing, and I was reaching out in a Facebook group with other fellow coaches, and it's like, oh, let's have a collaboration. And I was maybe not very specific about it, but I thought like collaboration means like inviting forth and back. And then I figured that not many people were inviting me back, which is fine. And for some, I thought it's, they were not looking for someone to invite back because they were not proactive with their holding IG lives on their Instagram feed. Yeah. So yeah, obviously
I think that part of it is that the way the give and get it's not a transaction. So I never assume because I've invited someone to be on my podcast that I'm automatically going to be invited to theirs. And when people stipulate that they want to be on my show and they'll put me on, like they make it like a quid quote. I'm like, I'm choosing people because I want them to be on my show because I think it's good for my audience. Like it's sometimes it's a great fit when they suggest that, but that would have happened organically through a conversation and it wouldn't have been in the initial like pitch. So I'm always a little like, oh, it seems a little pushy here. I'll give you an example. I have self-published 2 books that each had 100 reviews within a week of the launch date, and both have 200 reviews now. And that doesn't happen without a lot of asking. And so the first thing I did is I was writing the book, and the finishing touches, I built a landing page to sign people up to a launch team. And then every time I talked about the book online and people said, ooh, that looks really great, I'm excited for you, I'd say, hey, would you join my launch team, and share the link. And so I was slowly building up some people who were sort of, opting in, I'm happy to help. But then I like really nurtured people through the process of actually writing and posting a review. So the first part was making it clear that I was doing something that was beyond my scope as an individual. I was going to need some community support to even get accountability to get it written. And that once it was out there in the world, I would need some help getting it boosted marketing wise. But the intake form, so people signed up for my launch team and they filled out an intake form, which was it was optional, but 75, 80% of the people filled it out. The first question was I love to share knowledge and expertise. Do you know anyone who hosts any kind of interview style show? And I got a lot of people who were doing lives, who were doing like their own podcast, whatever it was. And what was great was I was working to get on podcasts, and that was a huge effort. And I actually paid someone to help me do that. And that all takes a lot of advanced planning. I felt like I was too late to going back to these community people and saying, I'm ready now. Well, it turns out people who schedule lives schedule it for tomorrow. So I did all this upfront work to get on podcasts, because that was like 2 months lead time and everything being formal and all this stuff. And then I was like, hey, community, I'm ready now. And I wrote notes individually to all the people who said, oh, I do a live on this or this or this. And I was like, great. They're like, oh, do you want to do tomorrow? And I was like, oh, sure. So I must have been on like 25 lives because of that one ask, like just by putting that request in. And then I got referred to some great shows that they were listeners of. And they were like, you'd be a great guest for this podcast that I listened to. And getting an introduction from a guest is a great way of getting on a show, much better than me just directly trying to write a host out of the blue. And so that's a place where good luck comes from advanced planning, right? It was very good luck that I was able to be on all those shows, but the advanced planning was, I knew I was going to want to ask that question later. So I seeded that thought early on and let people raise their hand and say, I'm interested in helping in that way. And so I honor people doing small tasks and then inviting them to do more with me over time. So there was like the initial request in there, and then some people like immediately took action. And so then I was like, well, there's this other thing, and there's this other thing, and there's this other thing. And it happened that there was a handful of people who just stayed with me the whole journey. And they, at the end, were like doing mega, promotional stuff, supporting me in a bigger way. But they felt like they were part of something. If I had just out of the gate asked everyone to do that, that wouldn't have worked. And you don't want to ask 16 things to one person, but I think engagement is, if they do a little thing, you're like, that's awesome. Hey, would you help in this other way? You seem like you really get this. Awesome. Hey, can you show some? So one thing I might suggest for you is maybe you should do a little how to host an IG live forum where you can show fellow coaches how to run an IG live. And that would be the way you would get invited on. Like, and I'm happy to be your first guest.
Oh my God.
Like, they may not be inviting you because they literally haven't thought of this. It's too difficult. They're happy to show up on your show, but the idea of doing it themselves, maybe there's a mental barrier, a technical barrier, whatever. And you could be like, well, I'll show you how to do it. And I'm happy to be your first guest. I'll help you out. And that could be another way for you to build some branding. That would be a give with an explicit ask sort of bundled in. That's the first thing I thought of, by the way, when you were talking right earlier. I was like, I need to teach people how to do this.
Genius.
Like, I love sharing that kind of content because the how that we built our business isn't precious to me. I worked hard to learn how to launch a book, and I've created the how of that, but I'm not trying to be known. I actually made the mistake. This kind of came up earlier. I made the mistake in one community of speakers as being known as the book launch coach, because I donated my book launch coach package to an auction a couple of years in a row, and people would stand up and talk about how helpful it was and how helpful I was. And so that's what people thought I did. And that's the mistake. If you're busy being known as a connector and not being known for the thing you want to be known for, you got to have, it can't be you're just a super connector after your name. Like Michael's known for creating models and I'm known for virtual event production, right? That's important to have the other thing you're known for, and you're a super connector. The super connector should never be the first thing, because then you're putting in a box that is not actually going to be monetizable. Like, I mean, unless you go and do the Michael Roderick route of trying to run a super connector convention, which in itself is not easily monetizable, and a lot of work.
Exactly.
I learned the hard way as well. A few years ago, I started a brand all about super connecting. 1 degree to connect. It was called the opposite 6 degrees of separation. And now I'm starting a business for a second time, and it's about public relations, right? And super connecting is part of it, but it's called the business personal PR, right? So I have my different, I'm a super connector, but I'm a personal PR strategist as well. Totally. I totally support that. Second that. Sorry, Mike. Sorry, interrupted you.
Oh, no worries, no worries. So I guess, Martina, what is the actual goal? So like you're doing these Instagram Live scenarios. Like, are you trying to build your brand? Are you trying to grow your business? Like, what is the thing that, if everybody who you helped and supported decided to help you in return, just magically, like every single person was just like, boom, now that you've done this, I'm going to give you exactly what you want. What is it that you're trying to make happen?
So for me, it's basically building the brand. This is the number one, just like getting a bigger reach to people, for spreading my message. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And then growing the
so
business
for
from
you,
there, obviously.
Gotcha. So your thought is, I want to grow my brand. So I want more people to share my content. I want more folks to have me come on and be an expert sort of within their environment, right? Like that's ideally what you'd like, right? You'd like to have, be on larger platforms, have more folks sort of have that happen. So I will just sort of throw out there, I know that Robbie's got to jump. Robbie, did you have anything you wanted to jump in on with this? Okay. So I'm going to just be very quick then, since I know Robbie's got to jump. But if your goal is to sort of build that following, the thing that I often say about this is that you limit the things you get in life when you limit other people's creativity. So if you just say to somebody, I want to be on your show, I want to do, et cetera, they don't need to be creative to like come up with an answer to that. It's just a yes or no. But if you go to somebody, let's say who they've done a live with you, and you say to them, my goal is to get more people to know about what I'm doing, and do you have any ideas? And that phrasing is really important, because if you ask somebody, do they have any ideas? There are very, very few people who will tell you no, because nobody wants to seem like they don't have ideas. But they're going to come up with so many ways for you to spread that message. Take care, Robbie. They're going to come up with so many ways for you to spread that message and to get the things that you want. Right? So the other thing I'll say about this, and I think this is really important, is that there's a lot of bad networking education out there, and a lot of that bad networking education is built around the idea that reciprocity operates the same way for everybody. So what you learn from a networking standpoint is, if I do something for you, you are going to want to do something for me. And that's the idea of reciprocity. But every single person has both a reciprocity impulse as well as a reciprocity timeline. So your reciprocity impulse is, how likely is it for you to reciprocate when somebody does something for you? And there are some people who, if you do something for them, it feels like a hot potato to them, and they have to give you something back right away. They have a very, very strong reciprocity impulse. They're like, I have to give it back to you right away, because that's just part of their world. But there are also people who have a very, very low reciprocity impulse. And if you do something for them or give something to them, they think, well, I'm the type of person who gets things, and this is awesome. And that's great. Thank you. I receive that. And they don't have a strong reciprocity impulse. And if they don't have a strong reciprocity impulse, we can't fault them for it, right? Like, there are going to be people who they're not going to feel that. And the same is true for a reciprocity timeline, because anybody who's ever done something for somebody and then had somebody come back to them and ask them something ridiculous in return has been burned by the experience, right? So they actually create a longer timeline around their reciprocity. they basically say, I'm not going to give back right away because I want to vet you and figure out, can I trust you to give back to you? Can I trust you to create this sort of reciprocity dynamic? So the thing that you have to be very, very careful of is understanding that when you give a gift, like inviting somebody to be on your Instagram Live, if it's a true gift, you can't have an expectation of return. You can't expect them to give you anything back because it's a gift. If you expect a return from it and they don't know that you expect a return from it, it's not a gift, it's a transaction. And it's a transaction that they didn't know about, right? So in your situation, if you are looking for more sort of collaborative types of things, rather than going and give it and saying like, come on my Instagram Live, and then being like, I want to collab, you know, basically saying, I would love to get on a call and talk about how we can collaborate. And from that conversation, figure out, do you want them to be on your Instagram Live? Do you think that they're, you know, saying something interesting or doing something interesting? And then have a conversation with each other about your audiences and the size of those audiences and where those opportunities might be. And use that, do you have any ideas? So like get together with them and say, okay, I want to collaborate, but I'm open. Do you have any ideas as to how we might collaborate? And they might say, oh, well, maybe you should come on my Instagram Live and I'll go on yours. Or they might say, oh, well, why don't I come on yours and why don't we do a Zoom together and we'll do some kind of, you know, talk or a presentation. You never know what they're going to come up with when you come to them and you basically say like, do you have any ideas? Right? You limit the things you get in life when you limit other people's creativity. Give them the opportunity to be creative and help you and support you. And that's what's going to get you to that further place. It's the misunderstanding about reciprocity that will just, it'll make you frustrated. It'll make you feel resentful of the people who you do something for and then they don't do something for you, if you believe that reciprocity operates in the same way all the time. It doesn't. So better to just basically be like, I'm going to make sure that folks know what it is that I am looking for and what it is I could use help with. I'm going to have these collaborative conversations and see where it goes.
Yeah, thank you so much. So many notes that were taken already. It's so good. And it's all about, you know, I love the reciprocity piece too, you know, that you were like explaining this, because obviously, you know, I was not like looking only for my gain. I had them coming and wanted to support them, but it was such great piece of advice with the, you know, not limiting others, you know, in the creativity. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Awesome.
Wow.
My pleasure.
Wow, so cool. So we will see lots of lives. Martina will be on lots of lives, not only on, yeah. She went live with me the other day, Mike. We were in the same mastermind. We're in the same, this is how we met, right? So we were in the same mastermind.
Oh, nice.
And I just DM'd her on Zoom and I was like, should we, like right after this, should we go live on in my group? And she was like, yeah, let's do it. I love spontaneous stuff. Yes. So, and you will be on many more lives, Martina, right? Absolutely. Cool. So I'm going to remove you from the spotlight. So people on Facebook are not going to be able to see anymore. Remove spotlight. Now, Christian, do you have a question? Should we bring you into the spotlight? Mike, do you have another, let's say 10 minutes until the hour? Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
No problem.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's add Christian to the spotlight. Christian, let's talk about your question.
Everybody. Thank you very much that I also get some minutes, and I appreciate that we extend this exciting event a little bit just because I'm still sitting here. My question is, we all know that the people are different. And I hear very often the advice that depending on which kind of person you try to approach, you need to consider a little bit how they are, where they are. You already said that, but I mean it more from a personality perspective. Some people like numbers, other people like to be inspiring, other people are more in this corner of being nice with everybody and connect and have this nice conversations, more superficial. Other want to go deep diving immediately. And then we have the strong leaders. And when you doesn't bring them some facts and some clear guidance, high level, you also cannot approach them. And then many companies work with this insights discovery with these 4 basic colors to put a first assessment into scope to understand what is better, which phrases, which focus is better. Do you also work with these 4 sets of basic types, or do we have other approaches how you can assess what fits here better from the approach to start the talk?
Yeah, well, I think that you know, there's a lot of tools out there, and there's a lot of tests, and there are a lot of things that basically say like these are the types of personalities that you're dealing with, right? Or these are the types of sort of like interactions, you know, that you're having. And what I find works really well is to basically sort of look at, well, what's been the experience of the meeting, because that kind of tells me like what experience of the meeting is going to be for somebody else. So I classify my meetings in 3 categories. So the first category is what I call the great meeting. And in a great meeting, I have a flowing conversation with the other person. We're just going back and forth. We're really just like connecting and chatting, and we may figure out ways to help each other, support each other in different types of things. But it's very, very, like, it's as if I'm talking to a friend that I've known forever, right? Like where it's just like we're just interacting really, really well, and it's, you know, it's sort of on that, you know, on that side of things. The second type is what I often refer to as the 2-way pitch meeting, where they are very sort of business oriented, and they're basically like, they make the meeting all about explaining to me what it is that they do and who it is that hires them, and they ask me who I know who could send them business, and then they talk to me about, they ask me about me, and they ask me if I can send them business, you know, and who they should send my way. And it's fine, right? But there isn't that same sort of level, you know, of connection. And then the last category is what I call the steamroller meeting. And that's where the person really doesn't let me get in a word edgewise, because they spend the whole time kind of talking about themselves, pitching themselves, sort of presenting themselves, right? And sort of bulldozing the conversation, right? And if I've had a bulldozer meeting, that tells me if I were to introduce this person to somebody else, they're going to be bulldozed, right? Like they're going to have that experience. So do I want them to have that experience? If it's a 2-way pitch meeting, then I know like, okay, that's the kind of experience. And if it's a great meeting, I'm like, well, I had a wonderful conversation with them. There's a good chance that other people within my network will have a really good conversation with them. So I look at that for like one of my sort of evaluating sort of systems is I look at how did that meeting go, and sort of how did I feel about that experience. And to speak to just the different sort of personal dynamics, I will ask myself, like, how did I feel when talking to this person? So if I felt like they were very short with me, and I'm going to communicate that to whoever else I'm going to introduce them to, right? If I felt like the way we interacted wasn't very free flowing. That's not to say that they shouldn't get an introduction. It just means that they have a different way of interacting, right? There's some people who are very, very shy and very, very quiet, and they're not going to answer a lot of questions, but they're still happy to help. They're still happy to do things. So like, I look at what is that interaction looking like? And then I ask myself, who do I know who, you know, wants to meet this type of person, and do I prepare them for that interaction?
Okay.
So if I'm meeting with like an investor, let's say, and I know that this person's like, you've got 5 minutes to tell me why this is valuable to me or why this is not, and that's it. And then we're ending this call. If I know that's their dynamic, and I'm going to introduce them to an entrepreneur who wants to, you know, get investment for their project, I'm going to go to that entrepreneur. I'm going to say, listen, this person will give you 5 minutes. It's going to feel like an interview. It's not going to feel like a friendly thing. Are you okay with that? If you're okay with it, fantastic. Let's have that, you know, I'll make
actually,
that intro.
before you can start to do great connections, you need relevant information, either by scrolling through the internet or someone tells you, and then you evaluate what does that mean for me when I now start a conversation, and based on that, either you do this, or 1,000 different options, right? So
exactly.
The relevance of understanding the complexity of other personalities in connection with networking is actually extremely crucial, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I often say is that communication is the very first thing we learn. It's the one thing we never truly master. We're always students of communication. We're always trying to figure out how do we communicate more effectively with each other. And something that worked really well for me in communication with somebody else may not work with the very next person I talk to.
Which again is connected to these personalities that are different. And I just made a lot of market research to understand what is currently out there from a personality analysis perspective. What can you learn and bring into perspective or analysis? And a lot is out there that is for free, which is even good.
Yep.
And then some are extremely expensive. Some of these can only be acquired when you pay for an additional consulting combined with some questions you fill out through. And overall, I think it's not about buying any services. It's more about learning what these tools can differentiate for the different personalities. And in the end, I made some kind of a list of understanding which ones are the best ones and which ones are not so very helpful. And then there is not just one analysis concept on the top of my list. There are actually two analysis concepts on the list, and this is spiral dynamics, 9 levels of value systems, and Reese motivation profile. Have you already heard from these two areas?
I have, I've seen material on both. And I think, you know, the thing that is most important to understand about this is that the best system is the one that you use, right? At the end of the day, like that's really what it comes down to. So like whatever works for you and helps you be as effective as possible in the things that you're trying to accomplish, that's the direction you go. I think that all too often we try to find,
you can only use what you know. So you need to be educated in something, and when you're well educated and you have it in your blood and don't need to think specifically about that, then you have the option to use that in practice. And my goal is actually to educate as many people as possible on the combination of these two top analysis concepts. And I'm trying to find many people who help me to spread this in the world as an inspiration approach to inspire people to learn about that, because the information is out there for free. You just need to find the priorities with all these options you have, what you can learn. And I just think we need that in this world. And I hope I will find a lot of people supporting me in this project.
I love that.
Okay, we need to talk maybe more on that offline, but let's see how this proceeds. I have a 3 minutes video which summarizes everything what I've collected so far, and this material shall be somehow improved, or people need to be guided to come to the end volume of this knowledge somehow, and I don't know exactly how I can achieve that, and I need a team of people supporting me with that. And I would really appreciate your help, because I realize you have so much experience, know so many people, and in the end, this specific project is for me not about earning money. I really think we need to help the world to solve some significant issues, and this might be the key to start initiation, which is then driving this Titanic to a bit of different direction, that we don't run into the iceberg.
Yeah. So I'm going to share something that I do as well, which is,
Yes, please.
so unfortunately, it's not possible for us to, ask people in our network or new people that we meet to just take personality tests, right? But we can ask our clients. So at the beginning of working together, basically, I ask my clients to take a few personality tests. I think there are 5 plus now human design as well, because I've recently come across human design too. So they do that, and then they give the results to me. But well, we do it for a number of reasons. Number one, because of course we have to work on their personal brand. And so it's really important to know the person before you build the brand, of course. Number one. Number two is for them to get awareness, self-awareness. Number 3 is for me to know how I can work with them. So basically I tailor my approach in the program that we do together, maybe a mastermind, maybe a one-on-one, but I can kind of, on one-on-one is better, of course. But really, I tailor the way I communicate with them and maybe some parts of the program as well. So I usually do that. And then there's another thing that I wanted to mention, but now I've forgotten.
I'll jump in and just say that it's for me. I've got to start to jump. It's getting a little late on my end.
It was so great to talk to you. Have a great evening,
Yeah.
afternoon,
Yeah.
whatever. And have a good
No
time.
worries.
Talk to you soon again.
Bye,
Bye, Mike.
Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much. Be in
Yeah.
Thank you
touch.
so much.
No worries. Yeah. Thanks for having me, folks. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you. Okay, awesome. I think now we can go. We've discussed so many things, guys.
Yeah,
We've been online
sure.
for 2 hours.
I look forward to the next event, and I will join again.
Yes,
Thank you
and
so
Thank you,
much.
Jessica, for organizing. That's amazing.
Of course, my dear.